Oh, I think we're live.
I see a little live icon on my
The joy
screen
of
share.
streaming, you can't take it back. But welcome everyone. This is all good. So I just want to give a huge welcome to everyone tuning into the session. We have two very special young entrepreneurial musical guests with us, Nate Barnett and Ariadne Lee. I'll just give a brief intro maybe to our speakers that you'll encounter today. Nate and Ariadne, I was going through your bios and I have a hard time finding what you both don't do. So I'll try and keep it short and sweet so we can focus on whale songs. But Ariadne, you're a soprano. You sing everything from top to bottom between opera, oratorio, and chamber music. You've worked with many organizations and ensembles across North America. And you are also a translator and a writer. And I believe your title at the Uncommon Festival is both managing director and soprano when the festival is in season. Really looking forward to hearing more about the Uncommon Festival. So thank you so much for being here. Nate, you are a conductor, a composer, a tenor based in Philadelphia. You've sung on a few Grammy-nominated award recordings, and also you work with Drip Symphony. Really thrilled that you can be here, and thank you so much for joining us. I will quietly mute and remove myself from the convo so you guys can get started. Here we go.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Jen. That was very kind. We're so happy that OperaCon is having us and that we get to talk about this project that we care a lot about today. And hopefully you will also learn things and enjoy it. As Jen said, I'm Ariadne. It's my colleague Nate, who is the musical director for the festival.
Hello.
And we're going to start. I would like to start by acknowledging that I, as well as McGill, the school that I go to, are located in Jajaga, sometimes known as Montreal, which is the traditional and unceded territory of the Ganyankahaga people, or Mohawk, who are part of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy.
And I wanted to acknowledge it here in Philadelphia. We are on the ancestral lands of the Lenape people, who are very much still present here and are still acting as stewards of the land today.
And finally, we're going to be talking about a festival that takes place in Sitka, Alaska, which is a small island, a community on Baranof Island in Southeast Alaska. And Sitka is the traditional and unceded territory of the Tlingit people, who have been caring for this incredible place since time immemorial. And many of you, I'm sure, have heard land acknowledgements before. In the interest of making this one a little more specific to what we're doing today, we want to read you a poem by Ishmael Hope, who is a poet that we'll be talking more about. It's from his collection, Rock Piles Along the Eddy. And it struck us a lot, so I hope it strikes you too.
Steps towards dismantling collective psychosis on colonized land. This is native land. Until you recognize this, there is no justice. Until you act on this, there is no justice. Until you dig deeper than empathy, there is no justice. Until you give up what you never should have had in the first place, there is no justice. Taking up the space, the land, the airtime, the mic, the profits, the recognition, the dialogue, the conversation, it'll never feel right. This Utah-sized village of skeleton people will always haunt you. The shadows slithering from the earth's fire pit will always follow you. You can't logic it away because this is insanely illogical. You can't normalize it because our ancestors' bones among the cigarette butts are snapping at your ankles. Our tears are staining your leather couches and organdy dresses. Our children who are multiplying like leaves are chewing on your knee tendons, smearing cow gut on your pant legs. At this moment, we are setting booby traps in your electric boxes, dropping pungent octopus bait on your roof gutters, sucking the grease from each other's minds, arming ourselves for the calamity that is already here, our burden since before we were born. At this moment, we are conjuring the heart warmth of all those who died by your guns and redundant viruses. At this moment, we are purifying ourselves in the waterfalls that you haven't yet mapped. At this moment, we are conducting ceremonies from pieces that grow like spiders' torn limbs, like raven's tail robes, rewoven from scraps dug up in river delta. At this moment, we are bringing groceries to our grandmothers, getting advice on how to remake the world when the settler state collapses. And our grandmothers knit wool socks for us, and our grandmothers feed us rice, seaweed, and smoked salmon. And our grandmothers teach us to speak up at the next insane panel. And our grandmothers remind us who we are, shield us in copper alloy. And if you want to learn how to undo this terror, begin by earning our grandmother's respect.
Yeah, Ishmael is a poet of Nubiak and Tlingit heritage. His website, it'll be later in the slide, is alaskanative-storyteller.com, but his work is incredible and you should check it out. We are going to be talking about issues concerning Native people, and we are white settlers. So we might screw up in this presentation. We have screwed up in the past, and we probably will screw up in the future. I hope that we invite you to call us out in the moment if you feel moved to do so, or afterwards to contact us if you take the time to tell us that our behavior is harmful in some way. We will be very grateful for that, and we'll do our best to change. This presentation is a story about how we reframed one of our main projects, hopefully to bring it more in line with decolonial justice. And we hope that you can learn from our halting beginnings and some of our successes and our mistakes and take away some of those thoughts into your own work. But let's start at the beginning with who the Uncommon Music Festival is. So it's in Sitka, Alaska. Why is it in Sitka, Alaska? In 2015, Nate did a fellowship program there called the Sitka Fellows Program. He composed a piece for local musicians. He had it put on in a church that we've since worked with a lot. We were both at Yale at the time, and there were various internships connecting Yale students with that community. And the following year, the two of us returned there to put on a festival. We didn't really know what it was going to be like yet. And that was the first year in 2016. And then we've kept on being able to do it for the past, until this year. Our mission statement centers on being accessible. So everything that we do is free. We've never charged tickets, and also accessible in terms of like the atmosphere and all that. It is equitable in that we, one important aspect in that we program, we do our best to maintain composer equity in the composers that we program. And it's community building in that we are really trying to work with community partners. We're trying to be embedded in the community rather than sort of coming in from the outside and like, we want to listen to the needs of the community. That's an ongoing process, but it is part of what our main goal. We are composed of an SATB quartet, 4 singers, someone who plays guitar and theorbo, so to the price of one, and someone who plays piano and organ. We do all sorts of music, but we focus on working with living composers, so we've done a fair amount of premieres and commissions by this point. And we also, for the past few years, have been working with these like quotas or this framework where we have need to reach gender parity at least, and then we have 30% pieces by composers of color, so we've been doing that. That's a whole other conversation though, so we probably won't go into that much deeper.
I'm going to talk a little bit about our community partnerships. They're a very important part of what we do and have been since our founding. Really, I think the reason is that, you know, when we went to somewhere like Sitka that is far away from both of our homes, partnering with these community organizations really helped us to understand the needs of the community and to design events and programs that really connected with them. And they also helped us build audiences. So if you take a look up here, you know, we have the top left corner, that is an event that we hold every year called Nature Music, which we do with the Sitka Sound Science Center, where we walk through the National Historical Park in Sitka, and we sing music along the way. And there's someone from the Science Center that gives some brief information about the ecology there. And these are other things, you know, there's a radio station there. We partner with the radio station every year. We've done events with a storytelling organization. But really, this is kind of the core of our organization, and it leads into this project because it starts really as a community partnership with a few science organizations in Sitka. So in 2018, we had been toying with the idea of singing with whales. It just seemed like something that would be fun. I think something that's important to know is that whales are just a really big part of life in Southeast Alaska. They are everywhere. You see them, you know, if you look at that picture on the left, it would be totally common to see a whale pop up right in the water there behind our heads. And it's a, you know, also Sitka, Alaska is a huge fishing population. There's a huge part of the economy is fishing. And so the fishermen are very much interacting with whales regularly. And so this idea had been floating around and we were really excited about getting to do that. And so in 2018, we started talking about this more and we had some conversations with audience members who said, you should really try it. You should get in touch with the Sitka Sound Science Center, which is a science center in Sitka that really focuses on specifically the fisheries in Alaska, but does whale research as well. So we got in touch with them and they said, well, really who you need to know is the University of Alaska Southeast Whale Lab. The University of Alaska Southeast is the Sitka branch of the University of Alaska, and they have a very active whale lab that studies the whales that live in and around Sitka, and they also record them with hydrophones. They do this really amazing work. So they're specifically looking at humpback whales, at sperm whales, and at killer whales or orca. And they have tons of great recordings of all of these different species. So we got in touch with them and they were really excited to work with us. And it started to form into this idea, okay, how can we work at this stuff? There were two big questions. The first one is, how do we literally sing with whales? They are so different from us. Their vocalizations are marvelous, but they are very different than what we conceive of as music and singing. So the one big question was, how are we going to interact with them? And two, what are we going to sing about? What is going to be the text? We are singers. We almost always have text when we perform. So on that one, Ariadne and I did a lot of research and we were really focused on just learning about whales. So we were reading about the different kinds of whales. We were learning through listening to podcasts, and we had a bunch of phone calls with Jan Straley and Lauren Wild who were there. And we started to learn these amazing things. Like, for example, when a mama humpback whale births their baby whale, they have to teach them how to breathe because they're born underwater, but they live part of their life above and they don't know that yet. So the mama whale has to take her big old tail and push the baby up. And that's when it's first able to take its breath and it learns, and then it, it can do that on its own. We were learning all these amazing things about whale culture. The orca, the killer whales, they in Northwest Canada and Southeast Alaska, there's basically genetically identical bands of whales, but they are completely segregated by just by culture. Some of them are very loud and some of them are very quiet and they never interact, even though they look identical and they are basically genetically identical. Anyway, we learned a lot about these different kinds of whales. Obviously, we kind of geeked out on it. And the first sort of go of this project was 5 miniatures where we tried out sort of different approaches to talking about these whales and to integrating with their vocalizations. The first one here is called The Air is Above, and it actually is sort of about that moment when a mama humpback whale births her child, and it's sort of attempting to take the perspective of that mother and telling it the air is above you, the sea is below, and you live in both of these places. So we'll play you a little bit of this. I just want to mention our audio engineer, Emil Ernstrom, was integral in making this happen because he helped take the music that I wrote and then sound design all these whale sounds around it. So that's the first little snippet. We'll play you one more. This is pretty different. It comes from an idea that Lauren Wild at the Whale Lab had. She said, sperm whales, they have these amazing clicks. They're extraordinarily loud. In fact, if you were next to a sperm whale when it clicked, you would die. That is how loud its vocalization. It would explode you. And they also do this really cool thing called creaking, which you're going to hear at the very beginning, which is that sperm whales use their clicking as echolocation. And when they get close to prey, it speeds up. So they get very refined information about where their prey is. So you're going to hear that. And basically our audio engineer built this sort of beat pattern out of their clicks. And we're singing really about a whale party. It's no more sophisticated than that. So here we go. Let's hear a little bit of that. So I'll wrap up this section of that. That was a tricky thing we did, and clearly we were still working on it. It was a workshop after all, but a really important thing came out of that workshop, which is that we got some really good feedback, including from some Native people who attended the workshop. And a few of them spoke up at the time and said, this is really cool work you guys are doing. Would you consider involving Native stories about whales in your project? There is a rich oral history about whales and their relationship to human culture in the Tlingit culture, which is some of the native people in Sitka. And you can just see in our little feedback form, I would love music based on local native whale stories. So we started to get this and this feedback, and we wanted to really incorporate it. I'm going to hand it over to Ariadne now, who's going to tell you a little bit about a different project at the same time, and which is going to tie together.
Yes. Okay. So this same year, we'd been doing an annual commission for a couple of years, and this is the first time that we worked with Ishmael Hope. He reached out to us initially because he'd been to our nature music thing, and he was wanted to touch base about like a potential theater project in Juneau. But once we got to know him, we started looking at his poetry, and we found this poem called Storyteller that really struck us as very beautiful and also something that we might want to set to music. We'd been sort of picking these like Alaska or Sitka relevant poems to commission composers to set for the past few years. So we commissioned B.E. Boykin to set this piece. We also premiered it in kind of a workshop format. That's the photo here. We had this little program, and the format was like, we came in, we had a reading of the poem, we sang it, we broke it down a little bit, talked about it, and then we sang it again. And we had Bob Sam, who is a storyteller who lives in Sitka, Tlingit storyteller. come and read Ishmael's poem. Ishmael himself was in Juneau. He's back and forth between the two communities. Looking at this photo now, I feel uncomfortable feelings because I just feel like it's maybe potentially a tiny bit emblematic of the fact that we had really a very circumscribed role for Native participation in this endeavor. It was like, this is the poem, but everything else is how we're used to doing it. And we sort of asked Ishmael these questions and sort of added some of his words to the program. And we asked him, like, how does your poetry relate to your storytelling? And like, who is you? And I don't know, I feel like there was just a real need to like understand it on our terms. And I don't know, in the perspective of the current, what we're going to talk about later, I have questions, but we got to start somewhere, and this is kind of where we started. Quick question from the audience. The workshop stuff is on our SoundCloud, the Uncommon Music, SoundCloud.com/Uncommon Music Fest. We're not at the point of doing a CD yet, but I don't know. Who knows?
Soon enough.
Yes. So we took that experience that we had that summer, working with Ishmael's poetry, doing this whale workshop, and we applied for a bunch of funding, and we got some funding from the Alaska Community Foundation and from New Music USA to work on conversations with whales. The idea of this project was it was going to be a 30-minute newly composed work. Nate was going to write the music. I was going to assemble the libretto from texts by authors with connections to Alaska to Sitka, all white authors, in retrospect. Anyway, but including cultural anthropologist Richard Nelson, who is a really important community figure there and who spent a lot of time among the Koyukon people and has a lot of had a radio show and a lot of literature about listening and interacting with the land. So I was gonna kind of assemble a libretto, and we were gonna work with Chuck Miller, who is a cultural liaison for the Sitka tribe of Alaska and a storyteller and a singer. He was gonna sort of there was gonna be a spoken element of him storytelling and then a sung element of us singing. We're going to perform it free a couple times. It was going to have the whale. Recordings. Obviously we didn't get to do this, but that was sort of the proposal. I was looking at these grant applications to aspire this to do this presentation, and both of them kind of had filler in that, like, we sort of put a concrete thing in the grant application because that's what you're supposed to do in a grant application without actually having worked out the details of that thing. Like, we specified a story that we were going to use, and we didn't know what story we were going to use. We were like, we'll work with Bob Sam again, and we hadn't actually worked that out. And I just say this to that was should have been maybe a red flag. And also, we felt really stuck in the grant cycle. It was like, well, we got to do it next summer. We need funding for it now. We have to submit this grant application. And that's a tricky thing. And I think, we're realizing how there's more work to do that we were kind of just hurrying past or overlooking. But anyway, there we were, boop to boop. We were going to do this thing this summer. We're planning it. Everything was great. And then we're like, oh, we have to cancel the festival. We're not going to be able to do a festival in person this summer. We're not going to be able to use this money this summer. And also, a lot of things happened in the world. And yeah, we came to a different place of reflection. The poem that we read at the beginning of the presentation, that was, I read that for the first time shortly after the murder of George Floyd, and it triggered some reflections. Like, what are we doing with this project? This is Native land, so how, are we coming in to tell Native stories back to people, as white settlers ourselves? Whoa. So here is the slide with some questions that we sort of asked ourselves and are still in the process of asking ourselves, some of which have defined answers and some of which do not. So who do we end up learning and interacting with? We have these community partners, they're great, and I don't want to downplay their importance and the importance of our relationship at all, but they are primarily serving, settler populations. Alaska is, I think it's, Sitka is 40% Sitka Native. But there is, there is de facto segregation in the community. So we were mostly interacting with white people. Are we actually honoring the land the way we want? Gosh, man, I'm not even doing that here. It is really hard to learn how to honor the land, even in the place where I grew up and was born and live. I don't think we're doing the work to like listen to people who do understand how to honor the land and take the lead from them. Systems that are in place, we benefit from white supremacy. There's many layers of privilege involved in the fact that we have this festival and that it's been able to continue. And colonialism has actively, like willfully suppressed the stories of Native people and their ability to express the ways that they think about the world, to live in harmony with the land. For these, I recommend that you check out Dylan Robinson's book, Hungry Listening. He talks specifically about how you were positioned as a listener and as a performer, and the sort of what it means when you have very circumscribed roles for Native people in your content. That's like, it's Native content, but it's never Native structure. That's something that he says in the intro that I found very striking. And what does it mean to be storytellers for this place? And what does it look like to act on the belief that this native land? Well, those are the questions. Those are the questions that we want to be working with. And we don't fully know the answer, but we now, now as opposed to before, we're really trying to like have those questions in the front of our minds.
So that took us to this past summer, which again was going to be the full, theoretically, this full production. But I think in a lot of ways, we were really grateful that we had to take that pause because it gave us a chance to reflect on what we were doing and to say, okay, this big thing that we were going to be doing, there was a lot about it that was just not really conceived well enough. So we basically decided, okay, this is a chance. Let's scale it back. Let's go smaller and let's get closer to the actual goal of what we're trying to do here. And so there was really two important things. The biggest one was we needed to be working really closely with a Native artist, and Ishmael Hope just came to mind immediately because we'd worked with his work before and with his text before, and he also has this interest in theater and other sorts of dramatic music. So we got in touch with him about using a poem of his that we had both fallen in love with from this same book, from this book, Rock Piles Along the Eddy, which I really recommend. And it was called Scientific Observations. It's basically a sort of his own creation story. And you'll get to hear that in the music that we're going to play you in a minute. But so we scaled it back and we were really focused on, one, increasing the interaction between the voices and the whales. In those earlier recordings you heard, it was more like I wrote some music and then we put some whale sounds on top of them afterwards, or we like created that beat and then we put music on top of it. But this time we really wanted to see how can we learn more about the whale sounds. So we spent a lot of time listening specifically to this solo humpback whale that was recorded in the Seymour Canal in Alaska. And we started to listen for the phrases that it was using and the way that it was combining those phrases and repeating them, and how that was creating form, and how it was developing over the course of 5 and 10, 30 minutes. And as we did that, we broke it down and we started to think about how we could engage that with a musical form. So we again, we're all on Zoom now, me and Ariadne, but we're doing these Zoom sort of experiments where I tried to write out basically a soprano part, and then here's the whale part. I tried to notate it in Western notation. Well, none of you will be surprised that whales are not particularly concerned with Western tuning systems. It was not very effective, and Ariadne was like, Nate, you can't, this doesn't make sense. Can we try again? So we ended up using more like a graphic notation for the whales, which just better represented the gestures of their voices. And also what it helped us do is just get Ariadne's ears more attuned to what the whales were really doing. And we discovered that when she just listened to them, she actually could really sort of follow and engage with it in a much more nuanced way, which was exciting. So, you'll see in the score, that it's more like her voice does a slide, and it's sort of implied that she's supposed to do it like the whale does it. and I think she does a pretty good job. It closes that piece that you're going to hear, that was this first snippet we created. It ends with an improv session, which is really just Ariadne freely singing over the whales. And I think this is one of the most effective parts of what we did this summer. It showed me how sort of nuanced it is to interact with a kind of sound that is just not at all grid-like the way that Western music is. And so we're still really experimenting with that. But when all was said and done, we created this thing where we licensed Ishmael's poem for $400, which was a step up for us. And we hoped really sort of honored his work there. And because we didn't have a big budget, we made this homemade music video, which we'll play for you now. And it ended up being broadcast on Raven Radio because we were doing, in lieu of the in-person festival, a radio festival with them. So this is In the Beginning. This was our second 0.1 attempt at whale music.
Yeah, I think for time, I'm not going to play the whole thing. So I'm going to start us off, and I'm going to skip forward to the improv verse. Okay, yeah, we know. All right, there we go. I'm so sorry. All right, where's the improv verse? Here we go. Ah.
So that is the experiment of this summer. And every time we do this, we learn more. There's obviously much more for us to explore and in a larger piece. But I do want to talk about sort of the centered goals of take 3 of what we're hoping to do next summer, assuming all things go well. And this is a 30 to 40 minute performance that we're planning for the summer of 2021, hopefully in person in Sitka. And the most important thing here is that we're bringing on these 3 artists who we are putting in lead artist positions. Specifically, Ishmael Hope is serving as the lead artist on this. He's a poet, a playwright, an author, a storyteller, and really an actor. He does so many things. And we're just really excited about giving him the resources and the time to create something and use us as his performers and these other guys. At Littlefield is another Sitka native, and he's an expert in native Sitka Tlingit percussion. He's also conservatory trained in Western percussion. He has experience with choirs. He's currently living in Seattle and teaches, and he's also a composer. He does a lot of things. So he's going to be working with us as a composer and as potentially a musical performer with us. And then finally, we have Chuck Miller here, who is a storyteller and an actor, and is the cultural and community liaison for the Sitka tribe of Alaska. He will probably, though we're not sure, this is up to Ishmael really, he will probably act as a storyteller in the performance of the piece. But that's something that we are still sort of figuring out, because I mean, really the interesting thing for us is that this is a project we are spearheading, but we are specifically not, the lead artists on. So we're really excited about working with these guys. They're all incredible, and there's a lot of hard work ahead of us. Collaborating is difficult anyway, and just like the fact that we're also dealing with these, our whiteness and the relationship between white people and Native people and Sitka, and just all of it. It's going to be challenging, but we're really excited about it, and we have a few sort of goals that we're sticking behind. And one of the big ones is just using our resources that we've accumulated to financially and artistically support Native creators. That's just a really important one for us. We know we have this privilege, and that a lot of times translates to financial means. And so we're looking forward to being able to put that towards this project and their work. We already feel inspired by their work. I feel inspired by Ishmael's poetry and at Littlefield's music, and we're just really looking forward to doing more of that. Learning about Native stories and ways of relating to the land from Native knowledge keepers. This is a huge one where I often think about the sort of bankruptcy that my own upbringing has around taking care of the land and the way that we treat our land. So we're really looking forward to learning about that and hopefully being able to share some of that with them. Contributing to a performance art that communicates some of that sort of explanatory. The last one's kind of an interesting one, and we're not sure about it, but potentially, we'll be participating in an art in a native language. Ishmael is a fluent Tlingit speaker and has expressed interest in writing Tlingit words for this piece, and also potentially to have us sing in it. So this is a huge question mark. We don't know, but we would just really be honored to be part of what is a larger kind of rebuilding of culture, because the Tlingit language largely was suppressed for many years in the 20th century. So we're really hopeful about being part of more art that uses it.
Yeah, I just want to make sure we have time for a few questions at the end. So just like we've talked to Ishmael, he's signed on at Littlefield. We've talked to the next step is to sort of get everybody together in a room and figure out, deadlines and stuff. Ishmael's not here, which we can talk about. He specifically really wants to focus on artistic leadership and not, so that's why, if you're wondering, like, why are they? Anyway, we can talk about that if you want. Final note, is it opera? So thank you so much, OperaCon, for having us. It was really great for us to do this presentation. We're so glad to be able to share with you. I think, we don't think of ourselves as producers of opera, but we're looking at something that combines like singing and a story of some kind and visual like movement elements. So, anybody can put those elements together, and if you want to call it an opera, that's great. I think we're not starting seeing it as an opera because we're really trying to like not limit what it should be. And I think currently the word opera does have some baggage on it. But I'm really excited about this conference because we're talking about the ways in which like calling something an opera doesn't have to limit what it is. And that's really cool. There's going to be lots of cool talks that you should check out. I don't begrudge anyone disliking or liking any type of music. If people want to dislike or like opera, that's fine with me. But so many of the projects presented here like really put like connection and artistic impulse first. And that is very exciting. Here is a slide. This has some resources. This is just some stuff that like I've learned from that's by Native creators. Go ahead and screenshot it if that's your thing. There's, lots of stuff, podcasts, books. And if you want to get in touch with us, you can email us at directors@uncommonmusicfest.org. You can follow us on Facebook or Instagram at Uncommon Music Fest. And that is our presentation. So I think we maybe have like 3 minutes for a question.
Sorry it went so long.
You are just incredible. We're blown away. The chat was exploding when the whale song music came on. Thank you so much, Nate and Ariadne, for sharing with us such an authentic and vulnerable chat about the challenges of telling stories about land. This has been really inspiring for all of us, so thank you so much. We'll take a few questions if anyone wants to pop into the chats. We have one from Rebecca Haas. From Pacific Opera Victoria. Rebecca asks, is this presentation being recorded or shareable? Yes, Rebecca, we will be rebroadcasting this at a later date to be scheduled for anyone who couldn't make it. And secondly, she asks, what has been the feeling in your conversations with Indigenous community about being involved in opera? Ariadne, Nate, do you guys want to take that?
I mean, to be real, we have not said the word opera in conversation with Ishmael. Because we're coming from this place where we give, it's mostly kind of a concert and like concert adjacent type of art that we're doing. Like, we're like singing in alternative venues and singing outside and singing in combination with the local storytelling group and stuff. And we're music people. Ishmael is, has this really strong background in theater, and we're combining, but we haven't called it an opera. I think that's interesting. I think that maybe a different question is like, just in terms of like our idiom of singing, classical singing idiom, the way that Nate composes, the way that I sing, are also, they're not blank slates. They are cultural things that are rooted in culture. And, that's been pretty, I think like Ishmael, has listened to our stuff and reacted well to it, just to the way we sound. And, I think so there's a basic sort of like mutual like thumbs up happening. And as we go forward into the project, I think we're going to have to negotiate more like what that means, like what role does that play in the work, and what's that saying?
And how do we get that mutual thumbs up?
Yeah.
Yeah, amazing.
And Ed also does a lot of jazz work in addition to Tlingit songs, so we're also looking at like, other idioms that are not classical idioms, that are also not necessarily native specific idioms. So we're trying to be very open-minded about it.
Awesome. Well, we can't wait to follow up on this project. We'll be following along very closely. It's a very inspiring project. So congrats to you both and to the Uncommon Music Festival. I just want to put in a little bit of a plug before we wrap up. As we said, Ariadne Lee wears many hats. She's also a featured performer in the digital opera projects hosted by Opera McGill, which is part of our OperaCon programming. You can catch Ariadne. I can't remember if it's tonight or tomorrow that your piece is. Tomorrow. Okay, it's on tomorrow.
On tonight or good too.
Yeah, so it's premiering tonight, and you can catch Ariadne as one of the featured performers from Opera McGill on that. But thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you, Nate and Ariadne, and we should see everyone around, I think 2:30 is the next session with the Canadian Opera Company. We're going to explore, we're going to go behind the scenes on a new commission, a new work for young audiences called Phantasma. But thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks so much for having us. My pleasure.